All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Angeline Evans. I'm a client solutions consultant with DaVinci Interactive. At DaVinci, we develop custom learning solutions for our clients for both adult and K through 12 learners, ranging from e-learning to instructor-led training, video and animation, web and mobile applications, websites, you name it. We also have our own learning management system, EcoLearn. And it was through developing those custom learning solutions that I met Maggie at Constellation. Welcome, Maggie.
Hi, thanks, Angeline. So my name is Maggie Romanovich, and I am the Director of Learning and Development for Constellation Brands. I've been at Constellation for 13 years, and the last 7 have been in learning and development. Most recently, the Director of National Accounts Learning and Development, where I support a lot of our on and off-premise chains, our category management as well, and some of our e-com. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
I think all of us here have really felt it and seen the impact that the pandemic has had on every industry, but including ours in training, right? So we've all had to be really creative and agile in the different approaches that we've had to take as things have shifted online. And that really brings us to our topic today, level set and level up, a learner-centric approach to training in a virtual environment. So before we get started, though, I did just want to take a minute to really just reflect on this last year, and especially for us as training professionals. So many of us in our field have had the privilege to work from home, but that comes with a lot of additional stressors, right? So we're juggling that blended work from home environment. Many of us might have kids who are also home and doing homeschooling. We have pets in the background. My dog barks strategically at every important meeting that I seem to host. So we're just juggling a lot. And also as trainers, we're not delivering that classroom in-person training. So we really had to shift our mindset on how we can provide those meaningful training experiences for our learners at the same time. And some programs, we've even had to put on hold. So I just think we need to just take a minute to reflect on that and give ourselves some credit. Maggie, what has the past year been like for you? I mean, in general, and then also coming from an organization like Constellation, you're already very large and geographically dispersed. Did you have to take any different approaches this past year?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, we traditionally like to get everybody together. We're an alcohol beverage company, so we like getting together. We learn better when you can learn from each other. So we've had to rethink the way that we approach how we're bringing our learners together, but also our learning to our learners. And as you mentioned, we had talked a little bit about, how can we make our time together more efficient? But I think this, time of COVID really amplified the reasons why we needed to be more efficient with our time. We're not running into each other in the hallways anymore. We don't have the opportunity to come together. But as you mentioned, we also have a lot of distractions in our homes, right? We're living at work now. And so rather than having a classroom, where we, the 20 of us can get together, we can turn off our, devices and our distractions. Where we're at now, our classroom is this big, and then everything around us is everything else. So as you mentioned, we have kids at home, we have, spouses who might be working from home. We have audio distractions, right? Like my son plays the trumpet and he sometimes will practice in the middle of a conference call because we're always on conference calls now.
Right. Yeah.
It's just, people coming to the doors, like you mentioned, your pets barking, the fight for broadband when we've got, virtual learners. My husband's a teacher teaching from home. So having that environment it's really helped us reshape the way that we are asking our learners to spend their time because they're experiencing that too. So how do we bring that to life so that the time we spend together is really intentional and we can get a lot of the, the work and the learning done. And because of that, we need to create a foundation where we can, like the title of our session says, level set. So how do we get everybody on the same page to prepare them to come together and have very intentional learning and interactions to really, optimize our time crunch, our, resource crunch, and make sure that we're really effective and efficient and make sure that it stays sticky.
Yes, absolutely. And I just really want to emphasize that point that now more than ever, we really have to be thoughtful of how we're using other people's time. Time was valuable before, but it just feels even more valuable right now. And we want to make sure that each time we're asking someone to invest in something that we're developing to help train them or help their professional development, that it's really worth it and it's going to be a good use of their time.
Absolutely.
So just to touch on what this session is going to cover, we're going to be talking about the benefits of a flipped classroom, I know that's not a buzzword you hear that often these days, but the flipped classroom is still alive and well, and it has such a great purpose, especially in today's state and environment. We're also going to talk about the use of secondary gamification. So just ways to tap into your learners' competitive nature and really just increase engagement on the programs you're creating. And then we're also going to discuss how learners can customize their own training experience and really get that personal investment in what they're about to learn. And then lastly, we will touch a little bit on, why learning shouldn't stop at that closing screen of your e-learning module or the last slide of your virtual session that says, thank you for taking this course. How can you carry that training and that learning and growth beyond the program you developed? And what are some tactics that you can use to do that? And so also, I just want to mention throughout this session, we are going to reference an example from Constellation Brands' learning audience. And so we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, but we'll be revisiting that kind of in a case study approach just to share some tactical examples on how we've been able to apply that. But before we get too far, I do just want to mention, so you can submit questions at any time. So take a look here at the QR code or link on the screen. I know this is a pre-recorded session, but we really wanted to have an opportunity to still interact with those of you that chose to join and listen in. So please submit as many questions as you like, or if you have any feedback or interested and want to hear more about a specific topic that we're discussing. Maggie and I will be hosting an upcoming episode of Powered by Learning podcast, Vinci's Powered by Learning podcast. So follow the QR code or the link and submit your questions anytime throughout the session. All right, so just to dive in, let's get started by just unpacking what it means to be learner-centric. When we use this term, we're really looking at one of the core principles of learning experience design, and that's where we're putting the learner at the center of what we're building. And I know that's something we all do as training professionals already, so analyzing our learner is always top of mind. But what we're really thinking about, so our learners, they're people, right? They're individuals, but more importantly, they're adults. So adults come with specific needs. They have their own experiences. They are coming with their own expertise and skill sets, and that's something we really have to honor. And along with that, being adults, you don't want to impose learning on them, right? No one wants to be forced to do something. You want to tap into how we can internally motivate them to want to learn and want to have that buy-in into your program. Taking that learning experience design philosophy that we're creating something that's really human-centered, it emphasizes on the fact that learning is a journey. It's not just a one-time event or a 15-minute module. There should always be more to it, right? And it's what we're striving to create is something that's inclusive and a positive user experience for them. One of the ways we do that is really by analyzing the learner. So Maggie, if you could just start us off and just to kind of set the stage for the examples we'll be sharing, tell us a little bit more about your learning audience at Constellation, and then we'll break down that learner analysis that you created.
Yeah, perfect. So I really put a lot of thought into this because, my philosophy with learning is I want it to be sustainable, I want it to be relevant, and I want it to be actionable. But that means different things to different people in the organization, depending on where they sit, both from a hierarchy perspective, but also in what function they serve on a team. So as we were going through this particular example, I've been using it since we put this together. There are really four types of learners at Constellation, and then you can scale that out, right? So we have people who are new to everything, right? Your entry level folks are people who might be new to the function, people who are new to Constellation, and those are the folks who need like the full gamut without giving them everything all at once. We have people who are new to the organization, so hiring in experienced professionals. Now they need to learn, not just they don't necessarily need to learn the practice of what they're doing. They were hired for that, but how do we do it here at Constellation? And also the Constellation culture. We're a lean organization. We are, we get a lot of experience doing different things, and we have a really strong culture that people come here for. So how do we get them to, dive into the culture right away? In addition to their job function. We have people who are leveling up, people who have been in the organization and maybe they're, looking to increase their skills. They're looking to take the next step in their career, and people who are explorers. So these are the ones who are like, I think I'm really interested in, moving into a role in this position. What are some things that I can do to learn? They're already part of the organization. They're looking to expand their career and maybe, take a turn like I did. I started off as a media planner and now I'm in learning and development. How do we support people through that? We look at those four learners and we figure out what within the function that we're trying to teach about, whether it's a software or new selling skills or, whatever we're trying to teach, what are the nuances based on where they fall in that spectrum. It's a lot easier to navigate once you have those personas laid out and you're building for that person. Additionally, it allows you to ask better questions. It frees up your curiosity, right? So then you can dig in a little bit more and ask more about, like, what did you do before? What, like you said, what experience are you pulling from? And how do we get you to the next level? And it makes it relevant because you can specifically tailor what you're offering to those folks and make sure that it's relevant. It's something that they can use as soon as they get out of the session, and they know exactly what they're getting into when they're completed with the learning event. In this particular solution, we did an analysis prior to of what sort of training has been done before, what worked, what didn't, and it turned out that there were a lot of different ways. This was a software training. There were a lot of different ways that our team was using the software. There was the full version, there was the read-only version, and some people had been through a lot of training but still weren't confident in it. So we tried to dig in to figure out, what caused that. Why have you gone through so many hours of training and you still get a little bit stuck? And really, when it came down to it, stuff wasn't sticking. Like you said, when you bring people to a learning event, you have people who have done it a lot and they're doing it every day. You have people who are new to the function, and you can't really meet in the middle because these people are going to get lost and these people are going to get bored. So that's when we decided, let's take a different approach, something we haven't tried before. We don't want to just take our live sessions and turn them into, virtual sessions. That's not efficient.
Right.
That's a big waste of time, especially when you're sitting in front of a screen. This is your classroom, like we talked about. So looking at that, we started analyzing, what people knew, what were the things that they needed to know, and how confident were they in completing those tasks. And then that allowed us to have a starting point to build the learning from. And it also gave us, we came to the realization that the flipped classroom is the right approach, because rather than, let's all get together and learn all the clicks and then go off and do the homework on your own. We came together, or we had them learn the clicks on their own at their own speed. So these people could get through it quicker. These people wouldn't get lost or feel embarrassed to ask questions. They learn that on their own time. They get about here, and then we can come together to create the work. And then the time that we spend together is really intentional. So based on the analysis that we did, thinking about those 4 personas, it really allowed us to build a robust learning solution that was really helpful to, tailor to, am I someone who uses this all the time? Am I someone who only uses a piece of the software? And that makes it more relevant. It makes it more actionable. And then additionally, you don't have to wait for a workshop to learn the software. So it makes it sustainable. No matter when somebody starts, they can dive right into the clicks and then wait for a workshop where they can build a little bit further, but it allows their managers to work with them if a workshop's not available.
Absolutely. So, when you and I first met, we even talked about you were using flipped classroom before the pandemic, right? It's not just something that's because we're virtual now that's meaningful. It's that level set, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about, we have a geographically diverse sales team, right? We have salespeople who are all over the country, and taking time away from a salesperson's day to travel, for a 2-day workshop where maybe they get, 10% of the stuff that they learn sticks. So we actually did for Power BI, the data software from Microsoft. We did essentially a 7-hour online course over the course of 8 weeks, where we had some check-ins, but they were expected to take that at their own pace, start practicing a little bit, and then we came together to do a hackathon where we had a couple hours of a review, and then the team worked together to create the work products that they use now, and the adoption rate was huge. And we weren't, and frankly, we were trying to figure out how to do it in a more affordable way too, because having everybody fly in for 3 days of an in-depth training and then only have 10% of those people continue to use it afterwards, that is a very poor return on investment. And there was a more efficient way to do that. And we figured it out. And now, almost everybody is using the software, and it's actually integrated into a lot of our data analytics.
That's amazing. So really, if we're looking at the benefits of a flipped classroom, it's level setting your audience. So it's a safe place for everyone to get the basics. Everyone's getting on the same page before they come together for an in-person workshop or an in-person discussion, virtual or live. And they're getting that foundational knowledge via maybe an e-learning or a performance support handout or job aid. And I think that's something that we should really call out, because then that's a place that they can go back and reference, right? So they're not getting everything in that live session and they have to go back and find their notes and figure out, when did we learn, this term or this, this essential skill set. They can go back and tap into those resources that are going to be readily available if they need a refresher, because everybody forgets, right? We all know that forgetting curve. It's hard to retain everything. So it gives them the tools to be successful.
Exactly. And in the workshops themselves, we discovered there were people in the organization who were experts. So now, we have the ability to learn from each other. We have the ability to see who is rising to the occasion and really adopting these things, or who has a knack for it. I guess, people can rise to the occasion and not become an expert. We have people who had a passion for sharing that too. So then it gave them more visibility, and it really elevated more people in the organization into those spotlights. And it gave us the opportunity to not have one person that gets all of the questions. Now there's like 5 or 6 people who, were vocal and participatory and, led a lot of the conversations. Now we have more experts. And we'll get, how we're leveraging that in an online forum in a little bit too. But, it was a really eye-opening experience to show how the flipped classroom can really work. And it isn't just a buzzword.
Absolutely. And to circle back to something we were saying earlier, it's making better use of people's time. So it's making that synchronous time together more valuable, because people are coming prepared and energized and excited. Whereas if you did all of that foundational knowledge in the same workshop early on, by the time you're ready to do those hands-on exercises and discussions, people are tired and they're a little checked out, and we have all those distractions on screen. So you're building that excitement, and people are excited to talk to one another then when they come to that workshop. They're excited to contribute, and they feel prepared because those newbies that might not have had that experience or that expertise are coming, knowing the right terminology and knowing the background information. So they're not embarrassed if they, not knowing something and coming off as a newbie or
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you learn those concepts, it's not, it's one thing on paper, it's another thing in practice. So when you're learning those things on your own, you're like, okay, I've got the muscle memory. That's great. Now we got to figure out what the nuances are when I'm actually trying to build something, and having somebody next to you who can help you go through the homework, I'm using that term because I was actually inspired by my husband, who's a math teacher who does the flipped classroom. He creates these videos, the kids learn their concepts, and then they do their actual math problems together. So they have something to, work on, and somebody there who can support them through that. And that's exactly what we did. Like, all right, go build your dashboard. And then it's like, oh gosh, I don't remember this part, or, now I got to go back through my notes. You've got the resources there with the people who are around you. And then you've got this work product that you're actually using once you leave the learning event. Right.
Gosh. Yeah. So, we can't express our excitement enough about the flipped classroom.
I can talk all day.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how we can increase engagement in these virtual environments using that concept of secondary gamification. So, and it kind of carries on that concept of a flipped classroom because we're creating a safe space. So we're using the term, everyone's heard gamification, right? It's a buzzword. We've all even probably tried it at some point because it's been around for a little bit, and it's something we're all really trying to integrate, because we know everyone has a little bit of a competitive nature that you can tap into. We're using the term secondary gamification because we're not building a game to teach everything, right? We're using it to enhance be an additional enhancement to a program, and just use those game-like elements to create that excitement and that challenge, whether they're challenging against themselves or they're playing a game against other people, just to really, boost it up. So we're going to show you an example of how we gamified this software training for the learners at Constellation that Maggie talked about. So this is really to increase their skill set in using space planning software. So we really want to help them, get a lay with software training. You want people to get a lay of the land of their navigation, where are things located. You want them to be more purposeful with their mouse clicks and efficient, so they're not maybe using the wrong settings. Is there anything you want to add, Maggie, to what the learners really needed to accomplish by taking this training?
Yeah, so our team is so smart. They're so capable of so much. And sometimes, we've all experienced this, our computers can get in the way sometimes, right? So what we wanted to do was really elevate everybody together to have one way of doing things. Because previously when we were training on this, it was however good your manager or your buddy who was assigned to you was. So now we've got a Constellation way of doing things, right? Like this is the way that, and we had our subject matter experts. We had a lot of people who do this thing for a living, pull together their expertise to build this and turn it into the e-learning. So, when you think about what we wanted our learners to be able to walk away with, we wanted them to have a start to finish if they wanted to take the whole path, and have an opportunity to demonstrate their skills and certify that. And to your point, competing against themselves, with these different challenges that we had them do, it gives them, it increases their confidence. And that's really what we wanted to see. Obviously the competence, we want that to increase, but we also want the confidence to increase so that people feel like, I know how to do this. I know how to get in there and make it happen quickly because we're moving at the speed of light. Everybody wants space planning to get done. So we wanted to make sure that people felt comfortable, that they felt like they could be quick, but also felt like they could go back and find resources if they needed to.
Right. Yeah. So before, just to set this up a little bit, before learners were asked to complete these challenge exercises, which were developed in Storyline, they all took foundational modules that were developed in Articulate Rise. So they got all of that background and baseline information that they needed. And because we used Rise and it has a great, left-hand navigation and table of contents, for those of you that might not be familiar with it, check it out. It helps them jump to just pieces they don't know, because software training, there's a lot to learn. So after they felt comfortable in a tool, then they went and tested their skills in these challenges. And the way we broke it out was for different levels of learners. So there were training camps in Articulate Rise for beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And once they completed that beginner section, they would take one of these challenge games and earn a title based on, completing that. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up that example for us and just give you a little preview.
Welcome to the Ultimate Space Planning Challenge Level 2. By now, you know your way around the space planning software, and you're ready to level up to Space Planning Associate. In this challenge, you'll be tasked with completing a series of steps. For each step you complete correctly, you'll earn 5 points. But there's a catch. For each step you complete incorrectly, you'll lose 2 points. To earn your Level 2 Space Planning Associate badge, you need to have a total of 90 points by the end of this challenge. Can you do it? Select Start when you're ready to begin.
So before I select Start, I'm just going to pause here for a second. So we did a little bit of fun with some little motion graphics animation in the beginning. Doing little bells and whistles like background music and sound effects can just amp up the fun factor a bit. And then the concept that you can also lose points, right? So everyone can earn points in games, but when you add that extra layer of risk that an incorrect click would lose points, then you're honing into those purposeful actions. So that's something I really want to call out that I think supported something like software training. So I'm going to go ahead and just click Start.
First, create a new planogram project.
And you'll see the point tracking appears at the bottom here. And to make it not too challenging, we did use hotspots to call out different areas on screen. So similar to like you would for a multiple choice quiz, right? So they have 3 options to select. If they select file, that's correct. And you'll see they earned 5 points. If they did something incorrect, for instance, the fixture library, they lost 2 points. So, and that's really how it carries out throughout the program. And if they receive that 90-point score, they are so lucky to earn a badge. So let me pull up that. Again, that music and those sound effects really just, amp up that energy and get them excited. So with badging, if Maggie, talk a little bit about how Constellation's audience use these badges, right? They weren't just for fun.
Absolutely. So at the end of the challenge, you received a link. And the link would take you to, we actually used Microsoft Sway. So it's part of our Microsoft 365 subscription. And we created a microsite that had the badge imagery, and then it had all the things that this learner was certified to do now. Like, we have validated that you do these things well and you received a passing score. Download your picture here. And so you download the picture, and within it is a hyperlink, and it links back to this Sway site. So they're able to put that in their signature. They can put a link to it in their HR profile. So, they can take it to their manager and say, like, hey, here's the documentation of what I did, right? I went through this and I validated and I passed, to demonstrate their desire for professional development. They can also use it. We actually had someone who was not part of the space planning organization apply for a job, and she said, what can I learn about this? Where can I go to find it? And we actually gave her access to the training camps, and she was able to feel really comfortable and confident going in, and she was able to share her badge. Like, I'm so serious about taking on this job that I went through, and I got my intermediate badge, and I'm taking the advanced one right now. And she actually got the job. So, it was really exciting to get that feedback, and you go back to those personas, right? As you mentioned, you've got those training camps. People can go in and out of it. They're open at any time. We have the challenges. So if somebody isn't really sure, where to start, they can, start with the challenges and figure out where they are. And then, we receive those badges. It demonstrates the leveling up for those, people who want to demonstrate that piece of their professional development as well.
Absolutely. And, I think that concept of the explorers as a learner is often forgotten about. Like, we sometimes just focus in on the learners that need to improve a certain performance, or they need to know this information. And we might forget about, I just want to remind everyone, don't forget about those people that might want to cross departments or go into a different career path, and making sure that everyone at your organization does know about the training that you're offering, because other people might be interested. And it's just a great idea to think about them as your novice learners that would maybe cross over.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, I think too, we could talk about the recommender engine right now, if you'd like, as we think about, who you are as a persona, right? The way that you can figure out where to start, we actually created a recommender engine. So it takes you through a survey of, what you're comfortable with, what you're familiar with, and it gives you a recommendation. Should you start at beginner? Should you start at intermediate? Should you start at the validator role, which is a different function within the software, to make sure that it's staying relevant. But also it gives, it's a little bit BuzzFeedy. It's like, hey, where do I fall on the map of, expertise? And it's another ways bringing that fun and game element. I mean, we're selling beer, we're selling wine, we're selling spirits. We're not, we need to have fun with what we're doing here, especially with software training, which can get a little dry. So I think we're really able to bring that fun gamification element to life in a way that is really beneficial to the learner.
Yes. So let me pull that up. So what Maggie's speaking about is basically this, we call it a recommender, but it's essentially a self-assessment. So we're asking the learning audience to create that journey and that learner-centric approach before they even take the space planning challenge series and participate in the training camps or participate in the challenges. We're asking them to assess their own knowledge and their own confidence level. And then we recommend where they start along that journey. And again, it's being more mindful of their time. They're opting in and opting out of certain sections based on what they feel comfortable knowing. So let me go ahead and just pull that up for you. This was an assessment developed in Storyline. It's non-narrated and it does not have background music. It's just a simple assessment that they would go through and complete a series of questions. And based on their responses, it outputs a custom result. So I'm going to say, I do participate in live validations in some way, and that would just mean that that's part of my job role. And as Maggie said, there's a number of different learning personas. So some people would select no. So that particular elective of this program wouldn't be relevant to them. And then also based on the version of the software that I use and how I use it. And then just some introductory questions on my knowledge of the space planning software and how things work. And then these checklists really dive into the types of tasks that they would be asked to complete in the space planning software. So we're just asking, hey, have you ever done this before? And are you comfortable doing it? And so they can check as many as they'd like. And based on how many and what they're checking, that all, again, feeds into that custom result. So I'm going to say I know how to do all of those. Maybe I only know how to do a few of these. And I'm not really familiar with any of these tasks. They seem a little advanced for me. And I do not measure coolers, so I'm going to select no. So this outputs a custom result, and it does tell me I'm an intermediate user. Now, as a trainer, you're thinking, well, gosh, I don't want people to opt out of really important information, right? Or have them jump ahead. We kind of built in a foolproof method here in that if they're rated as an intermediate user and they're saying, hey, I'm testing myself out of beginner, we're still going to ask them just to complete the beginner challenge. So they're really opting out of that beginner training camp where they get all that foundational knowledge because they said they know it. But let's just make sure they know it in the challenge. So they complete that challenge and they earn a badge, and then they're starting in the intermediate training camp and can carry on in that challenge. So that's kind of the way we built in that just surefire testing. So no one's skipping over really important information. And then here you'll see on the right, I have my additional recommendations. So this is where we filtered in elective courses that are part of this program and not necessarily part of that beginner, intermediate, advanced. They're really just specialized skills that we would teach based on a job role.
And that's a really important piece to pull out, especially when you are in an organization that allows you to have a lot of different, have exposure to a lot of different parts of the organization, right? So even though you might have two people with the exact same role, this one might do things a little bit differently. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't role specific, it was function specific. Especially as we think about those explorers, right?
Yes.
We didn't want to close it off to anybody. We wanted to make sure that it was really inclusive. Anybody can take these. We want people to take this. If they're excited about it, come take it.
Right.
It's a big piece of our organization, and it's an important priority for us.
Mm-hmm. And I think really, doing something like this up front at the beginning of your training, it's really just giving the learners some control. Again, we said they're adults. Give them control over what they're going to learn. It sets the tone. It also gives them a little preview of the type of content you're teaching, right? So it sets the tone for the entire course. And they're acknowledging that they don't know something. So they're prepared and ready and willing to learn those tasks because they recognize that that's something that they're going to need to see. And so it really, again, increases that personal investment. It keeps them more engaged, like we mentioned with the gamification elements. And it just also, everyone likes customized, right? We're kind of in an era of everyone wants something custom to them, and you're customizing their learning experience, right? So essentially, you're really giving them something tailor-made for them by giving them that option and creating that BuzzFeed style quiz environment.
Yeah. And just think about how many times somebody says, like, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start. We gave them something where it shows them how to start. And, we didn't talk about this before, but, having that gamification element of having, getting to choose your own adventure. I don't know if you remember reading those books growing up, but it's like, oh, what would you decide? Go to page, 32. This is an opportunity to do that too. And, and the great thing is, just like those books, if you're like, well, I fell into the pit, I need to go back to make the other decision. You can do that. It gives you a safety net. And people come out of the learning experience knowing that they did everything they could to get the learning required. And then it sets them up for more, for better conversations with their managers, better decision-making when they're doing those things on the job, freeing up, having some freedom because you know how to get this stuff done and you know where to find the information. Now you can focus on some of the things that we don't always have time for when we're trying to remember where we were supposed to click.
Exactly. So just to recap, so how can you integrate secondary gamification elements into your program? Do point tracking, and don't be afraid to raise the stakes by having learners lose points. So having that riskier experience is going to feel a little bit more memorable to them too. So it's also going to help with your learning retention and help things be more purposeful. Music, sound effects, and other bells and whistles up the fun factor. And award badges, but award badges with purpose, like Maggie talked about. So make sure that they're not just for fun. I mean, they can just be for fun, but they should also represent a qualification. We're in a world where badges are everywhere now. Your Fitbit, your Facebook, There's apps. Maggie, you were telling me about an app called Untapped, where you can, I think it's beer badges.
Yeah, we did a beer tasting and I was plugging them all in, and, I'd get like 5 or 6 badges that would pop up, and, based on like, you really like Pilsners, or you've had a lot of different international brands. Vivino, the same thing with, tracking wines, and, there's a lot, it's integrated into what we do every day, and it feels good. Be like, oh, I earned that. I did something special.
Exactly. Yeah. And just, a note with gamification, it's not just for entertainment, though, it's also for reinforcement. So just making sure it always has, a purpose and a place in your training to really reinforce that transfer of training and help them apply it. And then just to recap again on, this whole concept of letting your learner take the wheel. So letting them have some control, allow them to opt in and opt out, do those self-assessments to let them customize the experience, and provide independent exercises, right? So maybe they're really passionate about a piece of the training that you delivered. Have those resources available, downloadable, or in a participant guide, like an action plan, reflective exercises, supporting takeaways, because you never know what's going to really spark interest. Or if you're going to have those explorer learners that really want to dive in, they have those resources available to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, we did want to talk about, how can you make sure learning and growth go beyond the topic you're training, like go beyond the program for the topic you're training and into the field, right? So how can you carry all of that excitement and transfer of training for an individual on the job? And so we really wanted to continue it beyond that. Thank you for taking this course piece. And so Maggie, did you want to start by just giving us your take on that, and just, how you can support the team that also supports the employee, right? Your managers, your leaders, your supervisors, mentors, to help everyone be successful. So it's really that holistic approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I say this very lovingly, but we have to stop moving away from the rotisserie method. I don't know if you remember the infomercials where you set it and forget it. Like, we don't want that to happen, right? Especially in this, time crunched environment that we're in. We want to make sure that it's really targeted. So taking the learning outside of the classroom, tell people what they can do with the information and what's expected of them. Upon completion of this course, just like with the badging, when I click on that, oh yeah, these are the things I'm supposed to do. Leaving your courses open so they can go back through and navigate through. We also did sort of a video FAQ of, the people that you would typically call. If I'm going to call Keisha and be like, hey, can you tell me how to create a table? She can, instead of, having a bunch of one-time conversations, see, like, I created a video for this. Here's where you can find it. So making sure that those resources are available and that people know that where they live after the event, so they can go back and get that follow-up information. Having a manager toolkit is another really important piece.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. So being able to, number one, let your employees know that this is what is expected of you. And, we are, our culture is that we talk to our leaders about everything, right? We want to make sure that they know how we're pacing, where we're at. Like, we're a very communicative group. And we want to make sure that our leaders feel really comfortable coaching our people, even if they're not experts. We're not expected to be experts in everything. So how do we set up our managers to coach people in a specialty that we are not ourselves specialists in? Or, maybe we haven't done it in a while. So making sure, like, here's what your folks learned. Here's how they learned it. Here's how you can support them moving forward. Here's some questions that you can ask to start digging into the experience a little bit more. Here's where you can find information on finding a buddy. I think that that's a really critical piece of information that we don't always prioritize. A lot of time that comes way later. But we wanted to start with our leaders, and we've been doing that a lot more lately, and say, like, hey, we're about to, this new learning platform is available. Here's how you can support your folks moving forward. So by the time we announce it to the individual contributors, excuse me, they have a little bit of padding of information so that they can really support their learners moving forward.
Yeah. And so what Maggie's describing, is on screen now. So this was an example of a manager toolkit that we created as part of this space planning training program. So all these examples we've been showing you up to this point. So it really helped the managers and supervisors be successful team leaders, right? Because they're fostering growth in their staff. It's setting them up for success, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could just be a Word document that they can reference. That's a good guidebook. And, you want to be granular to a level that, helps them know how often you might want to check in, or maybe some ideas and examples of how they could give their employee opportunities to apply what they've learned on the job, but not so granular that it's daunting and impossible for a manager who's already very busy to execute. So you have to find that balance. But ultimately your goal is to make sure they're going to be supportive of the learning transfer before, during, and after the training, because they know what they're about to learn. They know how they learned, and they know how they can support them moving forward. And a great thing Maggie mentioned was a buddy system. So also, explain to managers the value of partnering up an employee with either a mentor or a peer buddy that they can, bounce ideas off of and have that social and informal learning, and explaining them how to do that in a way that makes sure all groups are, have buy-in and are comfortable with that relationship, and how they can, keep it fresh and keep it going, have weekly or monthly check-ins on the topic that you're discussing with that buddy. And just, being more tactical with how you're approaching that toolkit.
Absolutely. I mean, we ask so much of our people leaders. They have so much to keep track of. They've got all of their goals and making sure their team hits their goals. And we don't want to get in their way. Our job is to enable them, to enable their people so that they feel supported. So making sure that you've got that manager toolkit so that they feel really comfortable that something's available if my employee asks questions, and I don't have to, go through, miles of red tape to get to the right person. The resources are there.
Yeah. So to recap, supporting with learning transfer, definitely do something like a manager toolkit or a supervisor toolkit. So it's not just the employee you're training, you're also letting their leaders know how they can help them be successful, and do something even a little more informal, like a subscription-based learning model where you might have scheduled emails that prompt learners, maybe it's a quote from the training or a challenge to try this one thing this week, or, whether it's a soft skill or a technical skill, just something to keep it fresh and help, mitigate that forgetting curve, and carry that beyond. And I know, Maggie, you guys have Microsoft Teams, right? So, I mean, you've even done some social channels where you can do some of that peer learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in social learning. You think about the 70-20-10 rule, the formal learning is 10% of the time, and the rest of it comes from social learning and experience. So setting up Microsoft Teams, especially, again, we were geographically diverse before, and now we're all at home. So we don't have the opportunity to run into somebody in the hallway or, see somebody at a meeting where we can say like, hey, do you have time to speak about this particular issue I've run into. So we actually set up a Teams channel for, it's category and space camp, because who doesn't want to go to space camp?
Right.
Right. So we've got a Teams channel where we can go in and ask questions. We have a monthly forum where we can bring, some veteran experts to the forefront to talk about, pressing topics. We have, new up and comers who can be, highlighted as experts as well, where we get together and we talk about an issue, a best practice, a learning that we had. We have a problem that we can solve together, and then a Q&A. And then we continue that on Microsoft Teams, where we can throw in, our community, our category and space camp knowledge circle videos. We've got a channel for that. We can, throw up polls. We can have all kinds of interaction in there. Hey, does anybody have an NCAP job aid of how to create a waterfall, or, like different things that don't happen all the time. Like we can manage exceptions there. Instead of having one person to call, now we can crowdsource a lot of solutions. So I would encourage you to use, Microsoft Teams is great. It integrates with so many different apps that are already part of your everyday habits. Slack is a really good place to have that too. Group text, start small, just start somewhere, but create that network of experts so that you're, spreading the love, spreading the visibility, and really getting a lot of good information consolidated into one place. Because those Teams channels are a really great place for me to go and look and say like, hey, what are some of the hot topics? Maybe that's something that we should bring up in another learning event or a forum. There's a lot of value for learners, for managers too. I don't know the answer to that, but why don't you go ask that on the team site? Creating that habit of getting people to ask questions and be more feedback forward, and asking good questions and raising those issues to the forefront. Those are really great ways to do that through that social learning.
Absolutely. So that actually brings us to the end of our session, Level Set and Level Up, a learner-centric approach to training in a virtual environment. We hope you all enjoyed it. So we talked a little bit about what it means to be learner-centric, the benefits of a flipped classroom, how to integrate secondary gamification into your next training, and just ways to let learners customize their learning journey. And then as we just wrapped up, we also discussed quick tips on how you can support the transfer of training and help your learners continue their learning journey beyond the program that you executed, whether it be in the form of an e-learning or a live session that you delivered. So again, if you have any questions, please submit them to submit this form. So go use the QR code or the link on screen. And we'd love to hear from you. And please tune in to Da Vinci's Powered by Learning podcast and keep an eye out for an upcoming episode with Maggie and I, where we'll be answering all of your questions. And thank you, Maggie, again so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun to talk with you about. I know it's a topic we're both excited about, so I hope everyone else enjoyed it too.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.